Sure. So we're saying that there are, when you play in different regions of the world, so there are important differences. And I was mentioning the differences in the regulatory approval process, but also reimbursement policies are much different in what is needed to get reimbursement in the various regions of the world. IP is a big problem, so what mentioned by Professor Ricordi right away it's a big problem, and what is the protection that you can get in certain regions in China is one of the major issues that we have. And government incentives to R&D and innovation. Where we are looking at innovation is mainly now in going to targeting and personalized diagnosis, what is called molecular imaging, or anyway development of biomarkers using existing medical imaging tools. That is an area that is seen as one of the most attractive and most needed, you see, but it requires, you see, a lot of efforts and investments, you see. But coming now to innovation, when somebody talks about innovation, it expects benefits from innovation. Increasing efficiency, better goods, improved services, economic growth, and improved communications. And in the end, what you need is increased satisfaction with the goods and the services by consumers, so improved standard of living and improved quality of life. That has been pretty true in many areas. And when Professor Ricordi was mentioning, see, the other areas, even if now you have industry which is moving and changing, anyway, in agriculture, steam engines, railroads, telecommunications, there have been a constant increase in constant innovation and advances in technology that led to lower costs, reduced manpower, and most important, a steady increase in the satisfaction with the delivery of goods and services. In healthcare, there have been enormous advances in technology, enormous. So the advances in medicine have been dramatic in the last 30 years. But there's been a large increase in spending. Big difference between telecommunication industry or railroads, agriculture, is that there is not a third party. Consumers buy directly the goods and the services. Here you have a third party, which is the government, of a payer that is in between. So you are a consumer, you have somebody else that has to buy your goods and your services. Okay, so it's a big difference that might also explain why there is this big difference. As mentioned before, there's been a tremendous increase in the percent of the domestic gross product, you see, domestic product in the United States in the last 30 years, going from approximately 8% to 17%. That has been true in all the, sorry, I was mentioning that, all the Western countries. And besides, even if there is an enormous increase in spend, there is a continuously rising dissatisfaction, not only from consumers, but also from healthcare providers. And the ugly is that, as mentioned before, this is going to continue. So there will be an increase in spend that is expected in the next years. So now, why you have this increase in spend? Certainly, the aging of the population is one of the most important factors. You see, increased public demand and expectation, rising prices of healthcare providers or labor costs, inefficiencies, but also advances in technology. And there have been several analyses to understand what are the factors that are involved in the increase in healthcare spend. And technology always has come out as the main factor in the increase in spend. Now, at the same time, though, so how can innovation increase costs? You see, it can expand the number of treatable conditions, extend the scope of medicine to conditions once regarded beyond its boundaries, mental illness or substance abuse, intensify the use of technology for the same condition, impacting the delivery of care, so treating more patients, extend life, so that then you increase the years of healthcare consumption, and also the improper use of maybe improper innovation. Now, anyway, innovation and the advance in technology has brought to incredible outcomes. You see, if you look at, this is why I mentioned before what we have in cardiovascular diagnosis. If you look at what happened, you see, in the treatment of acute myocardial infarction, over from the 70s to the year 2000, in 30 years, there has been a tremendous decrease in the rate of deaths from acute myocardial infarction at the hospital setting. For a lot of innovation that came from different, you see, innovators in the field. So there is a tremendous benefit that can be measured still dollar over dollar. So from 1984 to 1998, the change in treatment costs, this means not just the costs that were for treating acute myocardial infarction, but one more year of life and all the treatment involved with that, you see, was about $10,000. That 1 year of life is valued $70,000, so there is a benefit also from the economic point of view. So the key point is not just looking at costs, but also benefits. So, and this is a very delicate balance where you have a number of benefits. Could be a more accurate diagnosis, a more effective treatment, less discomfort, complication, improved quality of life, reduced number of hospitalizations, length of hospital stay, reduce hospital spend, reduce mortality and extended life, and improve quality of life. At the same time, the other side of the coin is that you have increased use of medical personnel, supplies, or training, high number of procedures and patients treated, and extended years of healthcare utilization. But the key point where technology really has a major impact on cost is on proper use. A technology that is not really valuable, and there is a lot out there. And second, inappropriate use. Suboptimal use, which is very often, overuse, wrong target population, wrong placement in the patient management pathway. So the environment, at the same time, so there was an increase in healthcare cost, has become cost conscious, and they want at any cost to bend the cost curve down. At the same time, it starts becoming, you see, sensitive to value and wants to bend the value curve up. And industry has to adapt to that. And not only generically to value, but what is value for the various key players in healthcare. So if you look at the key players, you have the physicians, or anyway, healthcare professionals, administrators, payers, governments, insurance companies, and patients and consumers that become more important. You have all heard about consumerism. So what is important to doctors is the treatment or a new diagnosis is more effective, is safer, more user-friendly, has a positive impact on patient management, improves outcomes. It's less invasive, improves efficiency, and the patients are more satisfied. Now are becoming, many centers now call patients customers. Administrators want improved outcomes, improve efficiency. That's very important because that reduces cost, OPEX, and patients have to be more satisfied. The customers have to be satisfied. So customer satisfaction becomes, you see, an imperative in many healthcare organizations. Payers look at outcomes, but especially at cost. Patients look at something which is more effective, safer. They are very well informed now. They go on the internet and get a lot of information on the various new treatments or innovation. Improve their outcomes is more available and less invasive. This is what they care. So, but there are different needs. The only common one is improved outcomes. So now, what is the value enhancing? Wow. Sorry. What is value-enhancing innovation in healthcare? Certainly intervention that prevent disease, like immunization. Innovation that leads to early detection and cure of illness. Rescue technology, as we've seen before for acute myocardial infarction. Interventions that are now, this is more and more important, they're not treating disease, but aim at reducing disability. And definitely information technology. So effective information management, wireless monitoring, robotic surgery, robotic healthcare support for the homebound, and telemedicine. Now, this was mentioned before also, so it's not easy to bring innovation to fruition. So it's a very long, risky, and expensive process. And the business case is really very challenging. So you have to need regulatory approval first. And there are more and more stringent regulatory requirements. And there is a continuous high clinical failure rate. So in our field, medical imaging, for one candidate that is brought to approval, there are other 15 that really are missed in action. And it's even more in the industry that develops therapeutics. And lack of harmonization is a big problem. So you may satisfy the FDA, but that is not giving you a return on the investment. You have to have the product approved at least in Europe and Japan, because they make about 85% of your return. Then, when you get the approval, it's not done. You have to create evidence that is needed to show the value of your innovation for reimbursement and to satisfy the various key players. This was mentioned before, but there is a recent analysis by Forbes that interviewed about 120 companies. And on average, the development of a new drug takes 10 to 12 years, and a total R&D investment of $5 billion. And it is just 350 for one, but the main cost is for all the failures that accompany the successful development of one drug. The same is true also for devices, especially devices that are called Class 3 devices, the ones that need clinical evidence, where the cost for one single device now is $31 million, and takes about 7 years for a PMA. Okay, and there are enormous differences around the world, but in the United States, you need clinical evidence and a PMA, pre-marketing approval. And the number of PMAs approved has decreased dramatically. So there is clearly a challenging business case here. In our field, for instance, medical imaging agents, in the years from 1986 to 1999 have been 44 products approved by the FDA, only 12 in the following 15 years. Now, also, when you look at them, and we go back now to acute myocardial infarction, and you look at new innovation to decrease the death rate there has been very little. Drug-eluting stents, and now thrombectomy, devices for thrombectomy. And definitely death rate has not decreased much in the last 8 to 10 years. Plus, there is another problem, which is you bring innovation, and you start with the pilot trials, the initial clinical evidence. You have the early adopters, the visionaries, the pioneers. Then you have larger clinical evidence, professional guidelines, education and training, the late adopters or the late pragmatists, and then you have an established technology. But most technologies, you see, stop between the early adopters and the late adopter for a number of reasons. So what to do? So industry definitely has to look at the unmet needs. Bring something which is valuable, possibly making a transformational change for patients, as was mentioned before, for the treatment of diabetes, and change the way medicine is practiced. Look to do things in a way that has the highest probability of creating great outcomes and doing things that have the most efficiency. Start development with the end in mind. So what is the final benefit to healthcare? And provide all the necessary evidence. Don't stop at the regulatory approval to make sure that really this is valuable innovation. Governments have a tremendous role. They have really to focus on clinical excellence, improve the health instead just of cost savings. Now it's just decrease cost. That's not how you improve health. Comparing evidence on cost-benefit of different technologies, and properly assess the strength of the evidence. Because many times the evidence is very, very poor. Providing incentives. This is the most important thing that governments can do. So I was hearing before the incentive is just education. No, tax incentives. Also in Italy. Tax holidays. Reducing regulatory fees, especially in the United States, are enormous fees. So you will get your drug approved. It's $2.2 million to get the drug approved, and then you have to pay $100,000 every year to maintain the product on the market. Providing grants for basic research, which is done, should be done even more. Or grants or loan for capital investment, which is much needed, you see, to develop for innovation. Higher pricing for value-adding technologies, and extending the protection of intellectual property, which is a big one. Now it's 20 years, unless you develop an orphan drug. And it takes 12 years to develop a new drug for one region. So after, then you enjoy, so it takes 3 years or 4 years to get to break even. So to start with return on investment, and in 3-4 years, you're giving your drug and your investment to a generic company. And providing incentives and promoting widespread adoption, especially higher rate for reimbursement for more valuable innovation. Regulatory agencies, they should resist the temptation to ripple their muscles to really show that they're protecting, the public. They really have to create ways to, so the FDA is talking about the critical path, and the Europeans also, but they don't talk to each other. And you really cannot develop something which is streamlined and get to approval earlier in a more effective way. Increase harmonization, and so that you can have global fast-track development, rolling reviews. As soon as you have something finished, that can be immediately reviewed. Accelerate approvals, and have post-marketing confirmatory trials and demonstration of clinical benefit in routine clinical use. Academic health centers. I couldn't agree more about the development of networks. But certainly, academic center has to keep teaching innovation, to create a culture that accepts and embraces innovation, and also failure. Fostering innovation-friendly environments. All the necessary resources have to be provided, the time and the infrastructure. Support validation of innovation. Generation of necessary evidence, possibly sharing data to generate large data sets of information at all levels, not just the initial development. It could be also for the validation of innovation later on. And support large-scale adoption by development guidelines, education, and training. And finally, administrators and managers. They have to be familiar enough with the innovation, the advances in technologies. Most of the time, they're not. Make sure all the stakeholders, technology users, and anybody affected, that their life is affected by the innovation, have to understand that there are benefits, and which benefits and how soon they come. Be involved in the rollout of technology. They usually are not. They leave it to a project, they not participate in the project. Make sure training is effective and tailored to each user. And monitor proper implementation. And foster continuous improvement and measure outcomes. That's it. Thank you for your attention.
Skillfully, you avoided the